People think California is made of sunshine and second chances. They show you the beaches, the palm trees, the smiles. What they don't show you are the narrow apartments behind the highways, where the walls are thin and dreams learn how to stay quiet. That's where my mother and I lived, a one-bedroom apartment in East Los Angeles. The paint was peeling, the windows rattled when trucks passed, and the heater only worked if you begged it long enough. But my mother called it enough, and somehow that made it feel like home. My name is Emily. I was 17 then, and my mother was the hardest working person I ever knew. She woke up every morning before the sky changed color. No alarm clock, no noise. Just careful movements so she wouldn't wake me. I used to keep my eyes closed and listen. The sound of her tying her shoes. The quiet sigh she let out before standing up. Sometimes she sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, rubbing her hands together like she was gathering strength. She always whispered the same words, almost like a prayer. Just get through today. My mother cleaned houses all over California. Rich neighborhoods, gated homes, places where the floors were colder than our entire apartment. She scrubbed bathrooms, bigger than our living room, and washed dishes that had never been used. People paid her to erase their mess, and most of them never learned her name. She never complained, not about the chemicals burning her hands, not about the way her back bent more every year, not even when someone spoke to her slowly, like she didn't understand English, even though she did. By the time I woke up for school, she was already gone. Every morning, without fail, she left breakfast on the table. Toast wrapped in foil, a banana, sometimes a boiled egg, and always a note. The handwriting was careful, like she was afraid of making mistakes. Eat before school, be good, I love you, Mom. I kept every note. I didn't know why. I just folded them neatly and hid them in a shoebox under my bed, like they were something fragile. At school, everyone talked about things I couldn't relate to. Weekend trips, new phones, college visits with their parents. I listened and nodded and kept my world small. I studied hard because studying felt like the only thing I could control. Once, a teacher asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I didn't say a job title. I said I wanted my mother to rest. The teacher smiled politely, like I had said something sweet but unrealistic. They didn't see my mother at night. She came home late, usually after 8. Her clothes smelled like cleaning supplies mixed with other people's perfume. She always asked the same question as soon as she stepped inside. Did you eat? If I said yes, she relaxed a little. If I said no, she looked like she had failed at something important. At night, she soaked her feet in warm water while I sat on the floor and talked. I told her about school, about teachers, about things I wanted to do someday. She listened carefully, like my words mattered more than her exhaustion. Sometimes I noticed things that didn't make sense. There was one house she never talked about. If I mentioned it, she changed the subject. Sometimes she came home quiet, her face tight, her hands shaking slightly as she unlocked the door. Once, out of nowhere, she asked me what I would do if she wasn't around. I laughed and told her to stop talking like that. She didn't laugh back. There was one rule in our apartment. I learned it without being told. Never ask about her past. Whenever I did, her eyes changed. Not angry, not sad, just scared. Some doors are better left closed, she used to say. The night before everything changed, she hugged me longer than usual. Her arms were tight, like she was trying to remember how I felt. She kissed my forehead and told me she loved me. No matter what happens, she whispered, remember who you are. I thought she was just tired. I went to sleep. I didn't know that was the last night I would see my mother as just a house cleaner, and not as a woman running from something much bigger than both of us. The next morning felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. There was no movement in the apartment. No sound of shoes, no kettle, no quiet whisper. The air felt heavy, like something important was missing, and I just hadn't noticed yet. I sat up in bed and looked at the clock. It was already past 7. That had never happened. I rushed to the kitchen. The table was empty. No toast, no banana, no folded note waiting for me. For a moment, I stood there staring at the bare table, trying to convince myself this meant nothing. Maybe she left early. Maybe she was in a hurry. I grabbed my phone and sent her a message. Mom? No reply. I called once. It rang until voicemail picked up. I hung up quickly, my heart starting to beat faster than it should have. I told myself not to panic. California teaches you how to pretend everything is fine. I got dressed, locked the door, and walked to school with that strange feeling following me, like I had forgotten something important. At school, nothing made sense. Words on the board blurred together. I checked my phone between every class. Still nothing. By lunchtime, my hands were shaking. I locked myself in a bathroom stall and called her again. Voicemail. When the final bell rang, I didn't wait for anyone. I walked home fast, my backpack digging into my shoulders. Every step felt heavier, like the ground was pulling me down. The apartment was quiet when I opened the door. Too quiet. Her shoes were still by the entrance. Her jacket still hung behind the door, but her work bag was gone. I walked through the apartment, calling her name softly at first, then louder. No answer. That night, I didn't eat. I sat on the couch with the lights on, staring at my phone. I called her again and again until my battery died. I slept with my clothes on, listening for footsteps that never came. By morning, fear had replaced hope. I went to the police station alone. The officer behind the desk barely looked up as I explained that my mother hadn't come home. He asked her age, her job, whether she had ever left before. She cleans houses, I said. She would never disappear. He nodded slowly, like he had heard this story too many times. Adults leave sometimes, he said. Give it 48 hours. 48 hours felt like a lifetime. I walked back home feeling smaller than I ever had. When I opened the apartment door, something caught my eye. The closet door was slightly open. My mother never left it like that. Inside, everything looked the same at first. Her clothes hung neatly, just like always. But on the floor, pushed all the way into the corner, was something I had never seen before. A small shoebox. My hands shook as I picked it up. It felt heavier than it should have. I sat on the bed and opened it slowly, like I was afraid it might explode. Inside were old photographs, court papers, and an envelope with a name written on it, a name that wasn't my mother's. That was the moment I understood something terrible. My mother hadn't just disappeared. She had been hiding. I stared at the name on the envelope for a long time, hoping it would change if I blinked enough times. It didn't. The handwriting was my mother's. Careful, neat, afraid of mistakes. But the name wasn't hers. I sat on the bed, holding that envelope like it could explain everything if I just waited long enough. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told myself there had to be a simple reason. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it belonged to someone else. But deep down, I already knew. I opened the envelope. Inside were photocopied documents, legal papers, court filings. Words like witness, testimony, and confidential jumped out at me. My mother's signature was there, at the bottom, written next to a different name. I flipped through the photographs next. They showed a large house, the kind you only see in movies. A swimming pool, tall gates, security cameras on every corner. In some of the pictures, my mother stood in the background, half out of frame, like she was never meant to be seen. In one photo, she was looking straight at the camera. She looked scared. I pressed my lips together to stop them from shaking. My mother hadn't just been cleaning houses. She had been cleaning one house, over and over again, a house tied to something dangerous enough to make her erase her own identity. That night my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. For a moment I didn't answer. My hands were cold, my thoughts raced. Then the phone buzzed again. I picked up. No one spoke. All I could hear was breathing on the other end. "Hello?" I whispered. A man's voice finally came through, low and controlled. "You shouldn't have opened the box." My stomach dropped. "Who is this?" I asked, even though my voice barely worked. He didn't answer. Instead, he said my name. The way he said it made my skin crawl. "She told me this might happen," he continued. "You need to listen carefully." "Where is my mother?" I asked. The words came out sharper than I expected. There was a pause. Then he said, "She's safe, for now." I stood up so fast the box fell onto the floor. Papers spilled everywhere, but I didn't look at them. I couldn't look at anything except the wall in front of me. "What do you want?" I asked. "For you to do exactly what she told you to do," he replied. "And for you to stop asking questions." Before I could say anything else, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my chest tight, my mind racing. That night, I locked every door and window. I slept with the lights on. Every sound outside made my heart jump. Every passing car felt like it was slowing down for our building. In the morning, I found something new on the kitchen table. A note. Not in my mother's handwriting. Just 5 words written on a torn piece of paper. "Trust no one. Not yet." That was when I understood. My mother had planned this, and whatever she was running from. I spent the next day in a daze. I couldn't go to school. I couldn't call anyone. The only thing I could do was stare at the walls of our apartment. The walls my mother had lived behind for so long. Every picture, every piece of furniture suddenly seemed like it held secrets. I tried to remember the last time I had seen her. The way she smiled when she thought I was asleep. The way she hummed softly while cleaning the kitchen at night. I remembered her hands, always busy, always tired, and I realized that all of it had been a cover. I didn't know who to trust. The man's call ran through my mind over and over. Trust no one. Not yet. I didn't even know what not yet meant. Was it a warning, a test, or just another piece of a puzzle I couldn't see? By evening, I made a decision. I had to find out more. I couldn't wait for the police. They had already said adults disappear all the time. But my mother didn't just disappear. She had left clues. She had left me a trail. I started with the envelope. The legal documents mentioned a name repeatedly, Carla Reynolds. Apparently, my mother had testified as a witness in some kind of case. The details were vague, but it seemed serious. There were dates, addresses, and mentions of people with power and influence. I couldn't read everything at once. My hands shook, my eyes blurred. I folded the papers back into the envelope and tucked it under my mattress. I realized something terrifying. Whatever my mother was involved in, it wasn't just about cleaning houses. It was about something bigger. The next morning, I went to the nearest library. I thought if I could find public records, news articles, anything about Carla Reynolds or the case, I might understand what my mother had been running from. It was now watching me. Hours passed. I barely ate. I copied pages, took notes, and kept glancing at the clock. When I finally returned home, the apartment felt emptier than ever. I didn't hear footsteps, didn't hear the hum of appliances. Then I noticed the closet. The shoebox was gone. I froze. I hadn't moved it. Nobody else had been in the apartment. Yet it was gone. The envelope, the photos, everything. I checked every corner. Nothing. My chest tightened. Fear pressed against my ribs. I realized I was alone. Completely alone. And that's when I heard a soft knock on the door. I froze. My mind screamed at me to run, to hide, but my body was stuck. Another knock, louder this time. I opened the door slowly. No one was there, just another note on the doorstep. 5 words, same handwriting as before. Do not open the trunk. I didn't know what trunk. I didn't know what it meant. But my mother had never left instructions like this before. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Something was coming. Something I had been warned about. And now I had to decide if I would follow the trail my mother had left, or stay hidden and pretend none of this existed. The next morning I couldn't eat. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the notes, the man's call, the shoebox that had disappeared. Every sound outside made me jump. I felt like I was being watched, like the walls themselves were listening. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to find answers. My mother had always been careful, meticulous. She wouldn't leave real clues unless they were meant to be found. And that meant the envelope, the documents, and the warning notes were all part of a plan she had made before disappearing. I took the bus across town to the public records office. I carried a backpack filled with notebooks and pens, my heart hammering in my chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, but I forced myself forward. At the records office, I searched through court filings, newspaper clippings, and old legal documents. Hours passed. I found mentions of a wealthy family, a lawsuit, and a woman who had witnessed something important. The name Carla Reynolds kept appearing. My mother had been involved somehow as a key witness, but the more I read, the more dangerous it felt. There were threats mentioned, anonymous notes, and records of people disappearing. The same phrases kept coming up. Do not speak, confidential witness, identity protection. My stomach sank. I realized my mother hadn't been cleaning houses for extra money. She had been hiding, staying invisible, working under the radar while protecting herself and me from something very dangerous. I copied everything into my notebook and left the office. On the bus back, I kept looking over my shoulder. I felt eyes on me. Every time someone passed by, I flinched. I thought about what the man on the phone had said. Trust no one. Not yet. When I arrived home, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I checked the closet. Empty. Every trace of the shoebox. The envelope and the photographs was gone. Then I noticed something new. A small key taped under the kitchen counter. I hadn't seen it before. A key, no note. No explanation. Just the key. I didn't know what it opened, but I knew it was from my mother. She had left it for me. That night I stayed awake, turning the key over in my hands, thinking about all the warnings, all the secrets. Whatever lay ahead, my mother had prepared me. And I knew one thing for certain. The truth she had hidden from me was about to come out. The next morning, I held the key in my hand like it was a lifeline. I didn't know what it opened, but my instincts told me it was important. My mother had never left me something so direct before. This key was a door into her world, the one she had kept hidden from me all my life. I searched the apartment for anything it might fit. Drawers, cabinets, even the storage locker in the hallway. Nothing. I started to panic, my hands shaking as I imagined all the things my mother might have been protecting, secrets, evidence, maybe even danger waiting for me. Then I remembered the old storage shed behind our apartment building. My mother had never let me go there, always saying it was just old junk. I went outside and pushed the creaking door open. Inside, dust hung in the air like fog, and broken furniture leaned against the walls. At the back, under a tattered sheet, I found an old trunk. My heart stopped. It was heavy, solid, and had a lock that looked old but sturdy. I slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The click echoed in the empty shed. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside were stacks of papers, photographs, and a small box tied with string. My hands trembled as I lifted the first photo. It was her, younger, standing in a luxurious home I had never seen. The look on her face wasn't fear, it was urgency. A warning. I opened the small box. Inside were letters, court documents, and a notebook filled with my mother's handwriting. She had written everything, the people she had seen, the threats, the names of those who wanted her quiet. I realized then that her entire life had been a balancing act, keeping herself and me safe while hiding from people with power. A sudden noise made me jump. I froze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Coming closer. I wasn't alone. I didn't know who it was, but I knew it was linked to my mother. Whoever it was had been following her, and now they had found me. I grabbed the trunk and ran back to the apartment, heart pounding, every step echoing in my ears. I locked the door behind me and placed the trunk on the floor. I was shaking, scared, and yet determined. My mother had left this for me. She trusted me with it, and I was going to find out the truth, no matter the danger. That night, I sat on the floor, surrounded by papers, photos, and letters, reading every word. Her life unfolded in front of me, a story of courage, fear, and sacrifice. And as I read, I realized that the real danger wasn't just outside. It was knowing too much, knowing the truth, and becoming the next target. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall. The papers spread out around me like pieces of a life my mother had never allowed me to see. The notebook was the hardest to read. Every page felt heavy, like it carried fear pressed into the ink. She had written about one house more than any other, a place in a quiet, wealthy neighborhood. She described the cameras, the locked rooms, the way voices dropped whenever she entered. She wrote that one afternoon she had seen something she was never meant to see, something that made a powerful family panic. That was when the threats started. At first they were polite, money left on the counter, a warning wrapped in kindness. Then the calls began. Then the message was clear: stay silent or disappear. My mother chose silence in public and truth in private. She became invisible, changed her name, moved often. Cleaning houses wasn't just a job, it was camouflage. By morning, my eyes burned and my head ached. But I finally understood why she was gone. She hadn't run away from me. She had run to protect me. My phone buzzed just as the sun came up. Unknown number. My heart raced, but I answered. "You found the trunk," the same man's voice said calmly. I didn't respond. "That means she trusted you," he continued. "More than anyone else." "Where is she?" I asked, my voice shaking. "She's safe," he said again. "But only if you listen carefully." I hated how controlled he sounded, like he had practiced these words. "You're in danger now," he said. "Not because of what you've done, but because of what you know." I told him I wanted to go to the police. There was a long pause on the line. "She already tried that," he finally said. "That's why everything went wrong." He told me there were people watching, people with money, lawyers, influence, people who could make problems disappear, including people. "She left the evidence with you for a reason," he said. "Because if something happens to her, you become the backup." My hands started shaking again. "What do I do?" I whispered. "For now," he said, "you stay quiet. You don't tell friends. You don't trust the police, and you don't leave California." Before I could argue, the call ended. I stared at my phone, feeling smaller than ever. I was just a girl who wanted her mother back. I never asked for this truth. I never asked to be part of something dangerous. But it was too late. That afternoon, As I walked back to the apartment from the grocery store, I noticed a black car parked across the street. The windows were tinted. The engine was running. It hadn't been there before. I walked faster. When I reached my door and turned around, the car was still there, watching, and in that moment, I understood something terrifying. My mother wasn't the only one who had disappeared. She had left me behind to see if I could survive the truth. I didn't look back again. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and stepped inside, locking it behind me as fast as I could. My heart wouldn't slow down. I stood there listening, waiting for footsteps in the hallway, for a knock, for anything. Nothing came. That was somehow worse. I closed the curtains and sat on the floor next to the trunk. The papers inside no longer felt like clues. They felt like a weight. Knowing the truth didn't make me feel stronger. It made me feel hunted. For the next few days, I stayed invisible. I didn't go to school. I didn't answer calls from friends. I only left the apartment early in the morning to buy groceries, always taking different routes, always checking reflections in windows. The black car appeared twice more, once near the bus stop, once parked a block away at night. Never close enough to prove anything, never far enough to ignore. One evening, as I reread my mother's notebook, a folded page slipped out from the back. I hadn't seen it before. The paper was worn, creased many times, like she had carried it with her for years. It was a letter, not addressed to me by name, but I knew it was meant for me. She wrote that if I was reading it, then she had failed to keep me completely safe. She apologized for the life of silence, for the fear, for the secrets. She wrote that the people she witnessed hurting someone were powerful, protected by money and connections. She wrote that the system didn't protect people like her. And then she wrote something that made my breath catch. She said there was one person she trusted, a woman, a lawyer in Northern California who had once tried to help her disappear legally, the right way, a woman who believed her when no one else did. An address was written at the bottom of the page. I stared at it for a long time. The man on the phone had told me not to leave California. He hadn't said I couldn't move within it. That night I packed a small bag. Just clothes, my documents, and the notebook. I hid the rest of the papers back inside the trunk and locked it. Before leaving, I stood in the apartment one last time, touching the wall near the door, the place where my mother always hung her jacket. "I'm coming for you," I whispered. The bus ride north felt endless. Every stop made my stomach twist. Every stranger felt suspicious. I kept my head down and my hood up, trying to look like no one. By the time I reached the address, it was late afternoon. The building was old, brick, with a small sign near the door. A law office. Nothing fancy, nothing dangerous looking. I hesitated before knocking. What if this was a mistake? What if I was walking straight into a trap? The door opened before I could knock. A woman stood there, mid-50s maybe, sharp eyes, calm face. She looked at me for a long second, then glanced down at the notebook in my hands. "You're her daughter," she said softly. I felt my throat close. "Yes," I managed to say. She stepped aside and let me in. Inside, the office smelled like coffee and old paper. She closed the door behind me and locked it. "She said you might come," the woman said. "I hoped you wouldn't have to." I finally broke. All the fear, all the silence, all the strength I had been holding on to collapsed at once. I cried the way I hadn't since I was a child. The woman waited. She didn't rush me. When I finally looked up, she handed me a tissue and said the words I had been desperate to hear. "Your mother is alive." My chest hurt as I breathed. "But," she continued gently, "bringing her home won't be easy." I sat there in the lawyer's office, trying to process her words. My mother was alive. After all the fear, all the unanswered questions, all the nights spent wondering if she had abandoned me, she was alive. But the woman's next words made my stomach twist. "Your mother is in hiding. She's been moving constantly. The people she testified against, they have power, money, connections. They won't let her walk freely yet." I stared at her. "Then why is she alive? Why did she leave me alone?" The woman sighed. "Because she trusted you to carry part of the burden. She couldn't risk you being harmed while she tried to disappear legally. The trunk she left, that notebook, everything was meant to prepare you, to give you the tools to help her if needed." I looked down at the notebook in my hands. Every word my mother had written, every careful note, suddenly made sense. She hadn't left me because she didn't care. She had left me because she cared too much to let me get hurt. "But how do we find her?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "That's where I come in," the woman said. "I've been tracking her movements. I know where she is tonight, but it's risky. You have to understand. If anyone suspects she's returning, it could put both of you in danger. I swallowed hard. I have to see her. I need to know she's okay. The woman nodded. We'll go tonight, quietly, carefully. Hours later, we drove in silence through the streets of Northern California. Darkness had fallen, and the world looked different under the streetlights. Every passing car made me tense. Every shadow seemed like a threat. Finally, we arrived at a small, secluded cabin in the woods. It wasn't fancy, but it was sturdy. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the faint glow of light through the window made it feel alive. The woman knocked lightly. A pause. Then the door opened, and there she was. My mother. She looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that made my heart ache. But her eyes were the same, strong, sharp, and filled with love. When she saw me, her hand flew to her mouth, and then she pulled me into her arms. I didn't resist. I cried. She held me tight, whispering my name over and over. I thought I lost you, I said between sobs. You're safe, she whispered back. You were strong. You found me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a part of my old life return. The fear, the silence, the running. It was still there, but it felt smaller somehow. I had my mother back, and I finally understood something she had tried to teach me all along. Survival doesn't mean hiding. Survival means being strong enough to face the truth, no matter how dangerous it is. That night, I slept in her arms for the first time in years. I knew the danger wasn't gone. The people who had threatened her were still out there. But for the first time, I felt ready, because we were together again. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds outside the cabin. Sunlight filtered through the trees, painting the wooden floor in gold. It was calm, almost unreal after the past few weeks of fear and uncertainty. My mother was in the kitchen, quietly making breakfast. The smell of coffee and toasted bread filled the room. I watched her for a moment, noticing every detail. The slight tremor in her hands, the way her eyes darted to the window occasionally, the care she took with every movement. She turned to me and smiled, a small, tired smile. You slept well? She asked. I nodded. Yes, but I need to know everything. Why did this happen? Why did you leave me? She sighed and motioned for me to sit. I never wanted you to know all of this, Emily, but you found out anyway. I suppose it's time I tell you the full story. She explained that years ago, she had witnessed something terrible at one of the houses she cleaned. A crime hidden behind the walls of wealth and privilege. Something powerful people had worked hard to keep secret. She had tried to report it, but threats came quickly. She realized that staying visible, keeping a normal life, would only put me and herself in danger. I became invisible to protect you, she said softly. Every note, every careful word, every move I made. It was all to keep you safe. I listened, tears streaming down my face. I had never imagined the life she had lived, the dangers she had faced, the strength it had taken to survive. Then she pulled out a small folder. Inside were more documents, photographs, and letters. This is why we can't stay here long, she said. They are still looking. They still have power. But now, we can fight back. I felt a mix of fear and determination. The people who had chased her, the threats, the silence, it was all real. And now I understood that I wasn't just her daughter. I was part of this story too. We spent the day planning. Every decision mattered. Every step could be dangerous. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. My mother, the lawyer, and I formed a plan to finally confront the people who had tried to destroy her life. By evening, the sun was setting, and we knew we had only a small window of opportunity. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, hope outweighed fear. That night, I slept with the trunk beside my bed, the documents and notebook safe, ready for what was to come. I knew the journey was far from over, but I also knew one thing. We would face it together, and together, we might finally find justice. The next morning, the air was heavy with tension. We couldn't stay in the cabin any longer. My mother and I packed only what we needed: the notebook, the trunk with the documents, and some clothes. The lawyer had arranged for a safe route into the city where we could meet someone who could help us legally, expose the people who had hunted her for years. As we drove through the winding roads, I kept glancing at my mother. She was quiet, focused, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Every passing car made her flinch. Every shadow on the road made her tighten her grip on the steering wheel. When we reached the city, we parked in an underground garage. The lawyer led us through A series of hallways until we arrived at a small office hidden behind a bookshelf. Inside, a man waited, mid-40s, serious, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit the gravity of the situation. He introduced himself as Detective Harris, though I quickly realized he wasn't officially on the case. He was someone my mother trusted to handle dangerous matters quietly. "Your mother has done the hard part," he said, looking at me. "But now it's time to act carefully. The people she testified against still have influence. They will do anything to stop the truth from coming out." I felt my stomach drop. "What do we do?" I asked. Detective Harris spread the documents across the table. "We go public but carefully. First, we need undeniable proof. The evidence in the trunk, combined with your mother's testimony, is enough. But the moment they sense a threat, they will try to silence you both." My mother nodded. "I kept copies hidden all over. Some of it is digital. Some of it is physical. We can use it, but we have to be smart." For hours we planned. Every detail mattered. Every route, every contact, every potential leak. I realized then that surviving wasn't just about hiding anymore. It was about fighting back. Later, I asked my mother, "Were you ever scared?" She looked at me, her eyes reflecting a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Every day," she admitted. "But fear doesn't get to control you. Strength does." That night, I slept differently. No longer in hiding, but preparing. Preparing for a confrontation that would either bring justice or put us in even more danger. The next morning, as we left the safe house, a black car rolled slowly past us. I froze. The same car from weeks ago. The same one that had watched me when I was alone. Detective Harris glanced at it. "They know we're moving. Stay calm. Stick to the plan." I held my mother's hand tightly. She squeezed mine back. I realized something then. Fear might have followed us for years, but together we were stronger. And now, it was time for the world to know the truth. We followed Detective Harris through the crowded streets, blending into the throngs of people who had no idea what was about to unfold. My mother walked slightly ahead of me, her posture tense but steady. I kept my hand in hers, drawing strength from the touch I had missed for so long. Finally, we arrived at a small office building. The entrance was plain, almost invisible. Harris led us inside and up a narrow staircase to a room filled with computers, cameras and folders stacked neatly on tables. "This is our operations hub," he said. "We'll release the evidence in stages. Enough to make them react, but not enough to put anyone at immediate risk. Timing is everything." I nodded, trying to absorb everything. My mother began preparing the documents, double-checking every detail. She moved with precision, the same precision she had used for years to stay invisible. Suddenly my phone buzzed. A message. No number. "Stop or she dies." My heart froze. I looked at my mother. She glanced at me, calm, almost detached. "They're trying to scare us. Don't let them see it," she whispered. Detective Harris frowned. "They know we're close. But they don't know the plan." "Not yet." We worked late into the night, uploading digital evidence, copying files, and documenting everything meticulously. My mother instructed me on what to say if anyone asked, on how to protect myself, and how to stay one step ahead. By the time dawn arrived, we were ready. Every piece of evidence was in place, every witness accounted for, every escape route mapped. Then came the call that changed everything. Harris's phone rang. A deep, unfamiliar voice spoke. "We know what you're doing. Stop now or your daughter suffers first." My mother's hands didn't tremble. My heart raced. "Threats won't stop the truth," she said quietly. "We have everything we need. And the moment we act, the world will see the reality you tried to hide." The voice laughed, cold, cruel. "You think you're clever? You have no idea what's coming." The line went dead. I looked at my mother. She nodded at me. "It's time," she said. We left the office, stepping carefully into the streets. Cameras were hidden. Evidence was being delivered. Messages sent to journalists, lawyers, and authorities who could protect us. Every step was calculated. Every glance over our shoulders measured. And then, in the distance, I saw them. 2 men, watching from a black SUV, our old nightmare. They hadn't moved since the day we left the cabin. And now they were following. I squeezed my mother's hand. She squeezed back. "We finished this today," she said. And for the first time in years, I felt not fear, but determination. We were going to confront the truth, no matter the cost. We followed the plan to the letter. Every step had been rehearsed, every precaution taken. The evidence was now in the hands of trusted journalists and lawyers, ready to expose the people who had haunted my mother for years. The black SUV followed us silently, inching closer each block. My mother didn't panic. She walked with purpose, every movement measured. I kept close to her, my heart hammering, but I felt a strange sense of strength. We had prepared for this. Finally, we reached a courthouse on the outskirts of the city. A few journalists waited outside, cameras ready. Detective Harris led us in a discreet side entrance, avoiding the men who had been tailing us. Inside, the courtroom was quiet, almost sterile. My mother took a deep breath and handed over the documents to the authorities. I watched as she spoke calmly, clearly, and firmly, detailing every crime, every threat, every attempt to silence her. The men in the black SUV were outside, unaware that their influence had already been neutralized by the legal team and media coverage. The power they thought they held was slipping through their fingers. When the hearing ended, my mother turned to me. "It's done," she whispered. Her eyes glistened with relief. For the first time in years, she looked at peace. We walked outside, and the sunlight hit us in a way it hadn't in years. People passing by had no idea who we were, what we had endured, what we had survived. I realized then that California wasn't just beaches and palm trees. It was fear, courage, survival, and hope. And for the first time, hope was ours. Detective Harris gave us a nod. "They can't touch you now," he said. "Not with everything out there in the open. You're safe for now." My mother hugged me tightly. "You were stronger than I imagined," she said. "Stronger than I ever was at your age." I smiled through tears. "You taught me," I whispered. "You never gave up." That night we returned to a safe house, smaller than the cabin, but ours. No phones buzzing with threats. No shadows outside windows. Just peace. For the first time in a long time, I slept without fear. My mother beside me, alive, free. We had faced the danger, uncovered the truth, and survived together. And I knew one thing for certain: no matter what happens in life, courage and love can guide you through even the darkest times. California had tried to break us, hide us, and silence us. But together we had found the light. Days passed, but the fear that had once ruled our lives began to fade. The media coverage and legal protection made it impossible for those who had threatened my mother to reach us. Slowly we started to rebuild our life, piece by piece. I watched my mother unpack in the new safe house, setting small decorations, arranging books, and even laughing softly for the first time in years. Her strength was still there, but now mixed with relief. I realized how much I had changed too. The fear that had made me invisible, that had made me doubt myself, was gone. I had learned to be strong, to think quickly, and to face danger with a clear mind. I had survived, not alone, but with the woman who had taught me everything about courage and love. At night, we would sit together with the notebook and trunk beside us. We didn't need to hide anymore. But the notebook was a reminder of the battles we had faced, of the secrets we had uncovered, of the life we had survived. And I understood what my mother had always wanted me to know. Life can be cruel and unpredictable, but love, courage, and determination are the tools to face it. California, with its beaches and palm trees, had also given us fear, lessons, and strength. We had endured it all. We had survived, and now finally we could live. I looked at my mother one evening, the sunlight painting her face in warm gold. I smiled. "Mom," I said softly, "we made it." She smiled back, tears in her eyes. "Yes, Emily, we made it." And in that moment, I knew that no matter what the world threw at us, together we could face anything. The trunk, the notebook, the letters, all of it had been more than evidence. It had been a roadmap to survival, a lesson in courage, and proof that even in the darkest times, hope could guide us home. We were free, we were together, and we were ready for whatever came next.